And yeah, and then there's the moment you kind of like with some introspection, you think, okay, what do I want to do? What's the next step? Right, more bigger country, and you go from France to Germany, then they go to US, bigger country, more people, more sales, or more, budgets, more responsibility, and somehow that was not attractive anymore.
Okay.
And then I thought, okay, I need to do something that really has a meaning for me personally. But I think there's two things also that you have to be aware. If you switch career like that, right, you're going to lose your kind of expertise, your standing. Yeah. You will be confronted with your famous imposter syndrome, because there's a moment where you have to ask yourself, am I really at the right place? I mean, that's one thing you have to handle. You have to accept that you're not at the top of your game. You have to accept that you're a beginner. And I think that comes with humility. Then you have to be humble and accepting the fact that actually all people around you know more than you do. And then you bring your specific skill set, which mine was like being a GM, understanding how to form a group. And that's one thing. Well, my authenticity was always a strength, which I wasn't even aware of for a long time. I think for me, the things were always more important than me. I wanted to do a good job. I wanted to create a team, or I wanted to develop a drug. I wanted to get it approved. So the purpose of what I was doing was more important always than my personal
feeling,
moving on, or my personal career. And I think that's something that people feel, and that's how you come across authentic.
Today I'm with Frédéric Prince. Frédéric, I'm really happy to have here today, because he's a Swiss talent, and he has a really special career. He has a PhD from the Basel Universität in molecular genetics. He worked for Novartis for 12 years, and is now working at Roche. And but something is really special in his career is that a few years ago he decided to jump into the biotech world. It was in France with the Biotech Bluebird, and he made a special switch in his career, because he decided to go from the commercial, the operations, to the development. And that's why he's here today. And I'm really happy to have you here, Frédéric.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And welcome here in Zurich. I know for people from Basel, it's not easy to come here sometimes.
Yeah, that's okay. Okay.
Yes, Frédéric, I'm really curious about your career, your profile, because I was first wondering when you started to jump into your career, when you started your studies, and you were in Basel. It was in the 90s, studying molecular genetics. I would like to understand how it was in this particular city to jump into this world.
Well, it is obviously the city of pharma, and studying at the Biocenter. It's actually an institute that has been actually created by the pharmaceutical industry, because they needed more talents or more expertise in biochemistry at that time. So, yes, it was kind of like a bit the obvious thing if you grow up in Basel, that you will end up in the life sciences somehow, somewhere. And and I choose then a bit more by chance than anything else, molecular genetics in the lab of Professor Gehring, and working for many, many years in Drosophila.
Yeah, and but then finally you jumped into commercials.
Yeah, well, it's true. I jumped into the commercial world, but I had, we have to understand that the commercial world was a bit different. So it was more I had a product or brand manager role, but it was more like a medical marketing role at that time. The separation between medical affairs and marketing did not exist. So I jumped into this role because I thought it was interesting, because it was very, very broad. You could do, at that time, advisory boards to brochures. It was only the same person in a small country.
Then yes, you started locally, and then you moved. You've lived in 5-6 different countries.
Yes. Well, I started obviously kind of like a standard international career. I started locally, moved up a little bit in some of the in some of the hierarchies. And I was lucky being at Novartis at the time. I started at Bristol Myers Squibb, switched to Novartis. And there I went into these kind of development programs. And that gave me the opportunity for an international career. And then I chose actually to do my sales rotation. That was kind of like a prerequisite at that time, a sales rotation in the United States. They sent me to Florida. And then I stayed to move on to an international role or corporate role, and that was based in New Jersey at that time. And then one thing after the other, it's kind of like it's half you choose, half the company proposes, and then you move through these countries and roles without that much thinking of it, because it's the natural way. It's more bigger. That's kind of like the
every time
way
more
to
big.
go.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And then can you maybe select two things which are really important for you, for the person you are now? Some maybe things you've done or things you had to do.
yeah, of course. I mean, I think there's two. I went through two development programs, and these development programs were, one was for younger, younger in your career, and the other is a bit more advanced. And both of these programs were mainly focused on, in the broader sense, self-awareness, social awareness, self-control, all these kind of, emotional intelligence, tap into emotional intelligence. This has created a foundation for the career, because we all know, your emotional intelligence is going to be much more important than your pure synthetic intelligence, which is different in my role today. But we will come to that later.
In the order development. Yeah, then the first thing was this, like making this kind of programs. And do you have any other, I don't know, if it was something which is good or more difficult, or?
I think it's, well, one of the things is that I always thought that the more you're raised in your career, the more freedom you have. And it's actually the opposite.
Yes, I've always heard this.
Exactly.
The
closer you are to a big budget, big sales, the more somebody's going to watch you, what you're doing. And that has driven me a little bit away from the commercial world. The commercial world, when I entered, was very much fun. It was very creative. At the end, it was literally, managing a P&L.
Okay, and do you think it's because of you get more and more responsibilities, or because the 10 or 20 years after the role is changing? And
I think both. I mean, obviously the roles are changing, and the separation, obviously, everything that has to do with science, medical is separated from the commercial world. And the other thing is, if you're running an organization that makes $300 million sales, somebody wants to know that you do a good job.
Yeah.
And obviously then you have a little bit less liberties. I mean, on the basic stuff, you have more liberties, but you shouldn't intervene there. You shouldn't go and tell your brand manager what to do. That's not your job. So at the end, you end up doing finance to some extent, and people management, which is actually the fun part.
Yes. And, then people management, and then that is something you wanted to continue working on.
Yes, I think that's the fun part, right? So creating a team is something enormously fulfilling. If you can, and there's no recipe how to do it. You have to be lucky. It has to be the right moment. You have to be courageous also to change, right, things. But if you can create, from a bunch of people, a team, and you see how it works, that's something that is extremely satisfying to watch. And it's great because everybody profits. It's good for people who work, they have more fun. For you, you have less to do, to be very honest. And most likely the sales or whatever your performance will be better.
Yes. And yes, that's what you've done, at the beginning in Novartis. And then you arrived, when was it, 4 years ago, in Bluebird, in France, in Paris, like to create it from scratch?
Yes. Yeah, it's something that has, created, that was something deep in my spine. It was always there, something that was not quite right in the roles, and there was this kind of like, standard career path. And I knew emotionally, I don't really want to do the next step. I'm not really looking forward. And then by chance, it's a funny story because it's something that, how life works sometimes. I have a friend of mine who did a PhD at the same institute as I did. We were friends, actually. And when we went to Paris, I reconnected with him. And by chance, we lived, pure chance, literally next door neighbors. And he was working for Bluebird Bio. And one evening, it was at our place. I remember he had this glass of red wine in his hand. He says, "Oh, by the way, Frédéric, would you be interested in Bluebird is looking for a general manager role in France?" And that's how I said I knew about the role, and I applied. And that was the perfect role. That was what I was looking for. Okay. It was science, forefront of the science, gene therapy. Nobody had done that. It's building an organization from scratch. It was kind of like this little bit this entrepreneur thing. And it's also, there's no playbook you can follow. You have to create everything from scratch. You have to invent, you have to try, and you have to fail. And I thought that was the perfect role.
Okay, and how old were you when you started this? Because you felt comfortable enough to have the background to make this?
I was 40. I think I was 42 when I switched from this corporate career at Novartis to Bluebird. It's obviously high risk as well. There's something And
for a Swiss person, how did you? I mean, that's just
I took an insurance. No, it was something that it's kind of like it felt right, and it was an emotional thing. And then I moved in, and it happened to be the best thing I ever did in my career. And you want to know why?
Yes, of course.
Well, the biotech culture is something that is very different to the corporate culture. It can drive you mad, and it's fantastic on the other side. There's these two opposites, but there's a lot to be built. It's not like an organization like Big Pharma that exists since 100 years. It's great, it's built, you can build on top of something. You don't have to reinvent everything. In biotech, this does not exist, but it allows you to do things quicker, faster, maybe less, organized, less professional. That's fine, because for what you need it doesn't have to be the best of the best. And so that this kind of like pragmatic approach, this is something that I really enjoyed. Mm-hmm. In other instances, it's not good because you have laws that you have to abide to, and then you cannot be pragmatic. You have to follow the law. You have to be compliant, whether it's labor laws or pharmaceutical laws. And then sometimes it's difficult because you do not have the infrastructure, and then you cannot even build it because it's something you need from corporate. So you have to take external vendors, and that's kind of like sometimes it's difficult when you're the first one to do. But on the other hand, right, sometimes because it was gene therapy, we did things for the first time.
Yes, and that's one question I have is how was it when you arrived? The product at this phase 3 ended?
So
because you opened like lots of new things.
So the product was not. I mean, the phase 3 study was positive. It was in the process of being registered at EMEA only, actually in Europe. And our purpose of this organization, of the affiliates, was to make the country ready for ex vivo gene therapy. So you have the whole operational aspect of sending cells through borders, and certifying hospitals to do these gene therapies. Within Europe, or then in France, you have to certify hospitals. Now, normally hospital certification is a DGOS who does that. So you had to work with them to certify. It's something that did not exist. And I have to say it was fantastic because you start your work with the organizations, with the government or the institutions to create something. It's a partnership, and it's a different way of working with authorities that you normally do. Normally it's a bit of conflictual a relationship sometimes. The same with the reimbursement authorities. I mean, this is normally they want to have the lowest price, you want to have the highest price. But there was really a trying to working together to find a solution. How do we find common ground? How do we change these laws to be able to, to find the right price, for the right value of these gene therapies. That was very, very interesting, difficult because you do things for the first time and sometimes you go in circles. But we were, to some extent, successful.
Okay.
Till, you know.
Till maybe you want to talk about how the next step happened and.
Yeah, well, I think it was just unfortunate. COVID hits. It hits everybody. It hits Bluebird Bio at that time very hard because all the study timelines were dependent on their ex vivo gene therapy, the transplant, and it was considered non-essential transplants. During COVID, none of these were done, and this created obviously delays, and it was just a difficult time. And then Bluebird, unfortunately, had to take the decision to close down Europe because of the financial situation. Yeah. That was very unfortunate, but I wouldn't want to miss a minute working for Bluebird. Yeah. We were almost there. But
yes, and then the story is ended for Bluebird in Europe? Or?
Well, then we stopped. Bluebird stopped everything in Europe. For me, I took another role within Bluebird, so it did not impact me personally. Because before it was announced, I did this big move from the commercial world into the development world.
And it means the product you had in charge when you were in France, it won't arrive on the market in France. No. It's finished for this, or
it's
maybe later,
unfortunately right now it's not available. Now I cannot speak for Bluebird and for the future. I hope once they have launched in the US and have enough cash that they can come back. It is very unfortunate for the patients, mainly for the product that I was working on, which is an ultra-rare disease for those patients. I mean, there are alternatives, but not very good. Yes. And I think they're working out how to treat these patients. But now I'm not there anymore, so I can't speak to
but
that.
Just to kind of curious things to see how the science can, arrive sometimes in best cases, and we fight for this, but sometimes
sometimes it's very unfortunate, and I think it's not going to be the last time that something like that happens.
Yes,
it's just because if the business case doesn't work.
Okay, then you had the opportunity to make this switch to go from the commercial to the development.
Yes.
Was it something you had always in mind, or?
Yes, I did have this in mind already when I still was at Novartis. I was starting to have discussions. Now, in previous companies, there was always this saying, and it's always difficult. It's like, well, if you're not an MD, it's going to be very difficult, or you haven't done, your 5-10 years of development experience in whatever role. It's going to be very difficult because the entry role I was looking for was program lead. Because that's kind of like, it's the closest that comes to a general manager role. It's almost a general manager of a development process of a compound, because you have lots of functions that need to work together for a common goal. And I said that to the CEO of Bluebird, and then there was a first role open. I didn't get it. That's part of life.
Yes.
They chose another candidate, which was better qualified than I was, definitely. And then, as careers are built, luck happened, is that the other role of the smaller product was free. And it was just like, it was 2 years before approval. And one of the aspects that the CEO, Andrew Obenchain, was worried about was this transition from development to commercialization, to the operational readiness. And he thought that my profile would fit such a role. I would learn the development aspect, but I would bring in the commercial understanding, mainly having been the general manager for 2 or 3 years in France, how to operationalize something like that. And that was lucky. I was lucky to get this role. And so I entered into the development world.
Then you jump into the biotech world, allows you to do that.
Yes, I do. I mean, I have been asked several times during my career, how did you manage to go from this commercial world into the development world? And I think, first of all, my best advice is don't listen to advisors, because you get a lot of advice, a lot of negative people say it's going to be very difficult, you need to do this and this and this and this. I think the best thing is not to listen to that, is to say, okay, I want to do that. And it was on my plan already when I was at Novartis. It took me 3 to 4 years to get to that move. But if you're perseverant, you can do it. It's just you should not be discouraged by all the others telling you can't do it.
Yeah. Then, if you want to complete about the advices, it's try to find the organization which can be open to this, or find the right persons.
I think, well, first of all, yes,
product.
You have to do it into the organization where people know you, because they're going to hire you only for your personality and not for your skills, because you don't bring the skills that normally you would need in development, or at least you bring not all the skills that's needed in this kind of like a lambda curriculum. That's one thing. Then find the people who believe in you. I think that's very, very critical. You need to have a few people that believe. And the best thing is ask them, right? Go to your mentors and say, would you support me?
Yes.
And that's what I did. I went to Andrew and said, would you hire me in this role?
Yes, or no chance.
Yeah, and he said yes.
Okay.
If the time
Not
is
now.
right.
Okay.
Yeah. And if the answer is no, then obviously it's difficult, but then you have to consider, looking for another organization who is willing to.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say, because I have sometimes questions from people working sometimes in the world of science, sometimes in the world of commercials, wanted to switch, but or going from public things to go private, and it's always difficult to find the starting point, maybe.
Yeah, well, I think the most important for me is make sure people understand your motivation. Are you going somewhere, or are you leaving something? If people have the impression you're leaving something to find something else, then it's going to be difficult. If you're not necessarily leaving where you are, you're happy where you are, but you would like to do something else, and you're going somewhere because you have something that drives you to go there. I was driven by purpose. I wanted to look for more purpose in my daily job. I wanted to see something. The Biotech was my first step, right?
Yes.
There you do something, almost tangible, right? You start to create something. And then the next step was development, because I thought that's where you really create in pharma something. You create, a drug. And if people feel that, that's an emotional way of expressing yourself. If people feel that, then they're probably willing to give you a chance. If they think you're just fleeing because you're unhappy where you are, then it's going to be very difficult.
Okay. Yes, because it's always you are somewhere in your career, and then when are you allowed to think about this? Is it too early, too late? When did you decide to make the switch? Because it's at this stage, at this level, you at the level of leading a project, and it was not a problem if you were not an expert. But you understand?
Yeah,
you waited a while for having kind of a skill set, which is like
yes. I think you have to have some sort of skill set,
something to bring.
Yeah, I think it's easier. Either you switch at the lower level or whatever, at the expert level, or you do it at the higher level. In the middle, it's going to be very difficult.
Okay.
But I think there's two things also that you have to be aware. If you switch career like that, right, you're going to lose your kind of expertise, your standing. Yeah. You will be confronted with your famous imposter syndrome, because there's a moment where you have to ask yourself, am I really at the right place? I mean, that's one thing you have to handle. You have to accept that you're not at the top of your game. You have to accept that you're a beginner. And I think that comes with humility. Then you have to be humble and accepting the fact that actually all people around you know more than you do. And then you bring your specific skill set, which mine was like being a GM, understanding how to form a group. And that's one thing. And Yeah, this is something you have to be aware before you do that. I think you can prepare as much as you want. You're still going to be there in this moment and you feel like an idiot sometimes.
Yes.
And you have to know that that's okay, right? It's okay to ask stupid questions or feel like an idiot, but be aware of
not forever, but
but yeah, and then you have
progress.
to, and I think that's also, I mean, you go down to some extent in hierarchy. You might go down in salary. I hear a lot. I would love to do that, but more than a 20% salary cut, I cannot take. But if your salary limits you, then you have to ask yourself whether you really want to do that. I did moves where I had significant different salaries, but I didn't do it for the money. I did do it for something I wanted to do, and you have to go back and think, how did I perceive in my early days of career, right? With hard working, hard learning, trying to understand as quickly as possible, what you need to know. And you have to do that again, right? When you're in GM, you don't have to go into the weeds of the stuff because you can just delegate everything. But if you start there, you have to read papers, you have to really go back. And that's a behavior that you need to do. I mean, you're literally starting a new career, right? Yeah. You start at the bottom and you have to work up your way, and you have to own your your respect to some extent by trying to acquire knowledge.
Yeah, for you it was like the sense of purpose, or did you add in mind the fact you wanted to make your second half of your career?
I think a bit both. On one hand, I had a bit the impression I circled around in my commercial career, and I could have moved on, but I was always interested in. I always had this one thing when I was, selling drugs in one way or another, was I knew that I never understood exactly how a drug is developed. Well, but you know that you don't know. And that's something that always bugged me. I'm a PhD and I don't really know how these things work. And somehow that was always there. And then there's the moment you kind of like with some introspection, you think, okay, what do I want to do? What's the next step? Right, more bigger country, and you go from France to Germany, then they go to US, bigger country, more people, more sales, or more, budgets, more responsibility, and somehow that was not attractive anymore.
Okay.
And then I thought, okay, I need to do something that really has a meaning for me personally, and that's how.
Okay. And can you talk about the beginning, the new beginning you started? You really felt this thing.
That's difficult. I see.
Day one.
I see some faces, and it's interesting because the team at Bluebird that were there, they didn't change. We had a very nice journey for 2 years because we got it approved. We got it approved by the FDA. But at the beginning, it is super tough. I mean, you don't really know what you're doing, and those people that you work with are all absolute experts. And there's this moment where you're thinking, I'm not even needed. I don't even know what value I add. And that's super difficult, right? And then it's very difficult to restrain yourself to not to intervene, because as a leader of a team, sometimes it's good not to intervene. If things run, the best thing you can do is not intervene and just take yourself back. But then I was again lucky. I was always lucky in my career, is that we had a SUSAR that came in on my program quite early, and the SUSAR is an unexpected severe side effect, and that had an impact, and it's public, right? It was a myelodysplastic syndrome in one of these children, and it was clear that it was insertional oncogenesis. It was created by the drug, by an unfortunate insertion of the vector. And this is something that has a very prominent position in gene therapy, because in the 90s, the whole gene therapy field was stopped because of insertional genesis, where the FDA said, you guys don't know what you're doing, go back to a drawing board. And then they came back 10 years, 15 years later with a new design of vectors, with the lentiviral vector. And one of the things why these vectors were designed for was not to create insertion in oncogenesis. So this happens, and this goes up, obviously, in a biotech company to the board, up to the board. And then the CEO at the time, Nick Leshley, said, well, Frédéric, that's your job now.
Okay.
Organize the company's response, work streams and everything.
Okay.
And then suddenly...
You were here since a few months?
Yeah, 2. And then less than 2 actually.
Show your talent, Frédéric.
But then it's about organizing in panic mode.
Yeah.
A response team and stuff. Yeah. So that was good because he was trained to do that in different circumstances, and that gave me a purpose and created kind of like a certain standing of what I was organizing.
Okay, your quick win.
Yeah, well, it was tough for the children, or for the 3 children who developed that side effect. It was tough. For my career, it was good. I don't want to, it's hard to link that to understand that, but.
But then you have a job, and it was really related to the reality.
Yeah, it was. And what happened is that there was always the program was always at the brink of being closed. We always thought, maybe what happens now? What happens now? Do we close? Do we stop everything? Do we continue? And it was interesting to see that the community, the patient community, was very strong to continue. So that gave us also this legitimacy to push this through, and then they work with the FDA to better understand. And that was fortunate for my career, this crisis, that I could show my value, and then I continued, and I still had this imposter syndrome afterwards.
Yes.
Because it's a new world.
Yes, new world, and you were in late stage development.
Yeah.
Then a few months ago, you joined the new big player from Basel.
Exactly, the other one.
Roche. For doing early stage development.
Yes.
Why this move?
Well, it's a good question. Why this move? I would have say, well, first of all, it was a bit also first come, first serve. I was looking for different roles in development. I wasn't specifically looking for early development, but I understood that biotech companies, mainly in Europe, most of them, not all of them, but quite a lot of them, are still in early stage.
Yes.
Very few are in clinical stage. My profile as a late stage guy, that's not very, that's not what the company wants. And I wanted to go back to the biotech world, but biotech is a little bit in crisis right now. It's difficult to find
You were
jobs.
in Basel?
Yeah.
You were looking for something in Basel? Okay.
Yeah, for family reasons, we moved then from France to Basel. And so I thought, how can I prepare myself the best for the future?
Okay.
And I thought, let's go to early development.
Yes, okay. This first experience convinced you.
Yeah.
It was thought that you want to continue, and then you want to prepare yourself for the next steps. And okay.
Whatever my next step is going to be. Right now I'm at this Big Pharma, and I love it. It's early development, something I've never done as well, and I think I would love to stay a little bit longer, just to increase my expertise. I think switching every 18 months is not really a great thing. I did 2 years of Bluebird development, but that's because it came to an end. The life cycle came to an end. We get approval, and here I have a new opportunity. Life cycles are different as well in development in general. So when you start with the molecule, if you start the phase 0 go, and you do like a clinical development program, it will take you at least 3 years just to have your phase 1b finished. So it's easy to stay longer because you can follow your own project for that long.
And today, what is the most difficult things you have to do? Then you're starting to understand the role. You explain, the crisis mode,
Well, I think there's obviously matrix organizations always bring their own challenges, right? So if you have interpersonal challenges. That's kind of like one thing that exists everywhere. It's just that these teams are the biggest difference. I realize is that most of these subject matter experts, I would say the majority, the great majority, they work on 2 or 3 or 4 projects, depending on their specialty. Very rarely do people work only on one. So they're always teams of teams of teams. So it's very difficult to create this kind of like commonality, this team spirit, because they're a member of about 3, 4, 5 teams, depending on what they do. So kind of how this spirit is well, it's possible. I think you can create that, but it's a bit different than when you have a team where everybody works only for this team, for this purpose. So that's one thing that is a bit, that's a challenge. Then the other challenge is more like a challenge is that you have to close projects early, right? That's kind of like the mantra. If the thing doesn't work, you have to, cut the costs.
Yes, you're doing the funnel of the development.
Yeah, exactly. So either you accelerate the development to go through till POC, or you stop them as early as possible, because if you have no chance to. But that's difficult. There's this sunken cost fallacy that falls into that. It's like, well, I invested so much already.
Okay.
I passed so many gates. I don't see the efficacy signal. But there's 200 ways why, the patient selection was difficult or that's. So there's always a reason why to continue. And I think that's the difficulty, is to say, stop. I don't think that we have a future.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Because when you're in commercials, maybe it's easy to see if the sales are good or not. You have one line to check. Here you have, indeed one line, but maybe more emotional. I don't know if it's more emotional people because they are largely into data, but.
Well, I think even in the if you look at the color schemes, like definitely in early development you have more blue than red people, but you have a fair distribution of every color there. But it is difficult to stop, because when you stop this I'm just making this up in 1B, there's so much work that went into it. Not necessarily just money, but work and dedication of so many people. And then you pass this gate, you pass the GLP talks, then you pass the first safety gates, I don't know, whatever you pass, and you have always this hope, and then you don't see what you want to see. And then to have the courage to say, okay, stop everything. Let's put the rest of let's cut the costs and invest in something else. That's difficult. I think you have to be disciplined to do it, but it's difficult.
Is that something you're learning? How do you evolve? Yes, into this?
I think
it's new for you, but
it's new for me. I think first of all, these decisions are never taken by a single person. Yeah. I think that's how we create. I mean, all this organization, and this is true probably for everybody, we try to eliminate as much the biases as much as possible. So you have to have a board that has no emotional attachment to your project or any other incentives to go against or for it. So they will just neutral assess. You have to propose up for it, but they're neutrally going to assess it. I think this is something, I think it's obvious. I think it's just a discipline. I think the better you predefine what means your stop criteria, the better it is, right? But you always have to be open for opportunistic approaches, because we know in development, not all programs go straight ahead, right? Most, like some of these, we have famous examples, became very famous drugs, but it was not the first intended indication where they were failing. So it's always kind of like you always have in your back head, like, is there anything else?
Yes, did I miss something?
But you do it. You don't do it yourself. You have a whole infrastructure governance that you go through that will help you to take this decision.
As you want to be the first in class, the best in class, how it works?
Well, I think everybody wants to be first in class or best in class,
indeed,
right?
Yeah.
So I think there's a recent publication that clearly shows, if you look at the market distributions in patients, shares or sales or whatever, if you're first in class, you get the big chunk. Second, you already have much less, and then the rest is really small cells. So you want to be first in class. Then if you're second or third and you're best in class, it's still difficult to turn around the market. We have so many examples. It's possible. It is possible, but it takes time. And then, you're limited in time. So I think first in class, that's what everybody would like to be.
How do you... Yes, you don't know it in advance, and it's a competition. And how can you explain that, for example, today, yes, we know we have companies which are better than others in development, which goes maybe, faster. Do you have any really personal analysis on this?
Well, I
because
think
what's interesting is, yes, it lasts a few years and then it changes.
Yeah, I think if I would have the solution, I would probably not be doing project management, right? I think everybody wants to know. I mean, definitely some of the biotech companies are faster. They're faster for different reasons, right? They come, it comes directly out of academia. They did this discovery. Out of the discovery, they go immediately into the drug development. So they are faster by definition, and then either they're bought by companies or not. Then it's a bit luck, because most of the science that we are based on is common knowledge, right? Everybody has this more or less the same information. It's a bit a race: who's faster, who's more lucky to find your right molecule at the beginning, I think it's luck and a bit also risk taking. How much risk are you willing to take? Right? Biotech companies, by definition, take high risk. They do only two things. Versus Big Pharma, they do a lot of things, and they have always this: if I invest in A, I cannot do B. Should I do B? That might take this arbitration might take time. But I think this is I don't think we should say there's biotech versus Big Pharma. Big Pharma is much better in other things, right? I think
because today, I would like to have also this explanation, because it's we are in a world of transformations too, and the way pipelines are driven today is changing, and it's interesting to have your feeling of.
So I think I would say, first of all, Big Pharma can be extremely productive, and there's many examples out there which I will not be able to name now, but there are Big Pharma who is super
with internal development.
Yeah, with internal development. It's always a mix, right? But they're super with internal development. I don't think that in the research part, it might be that biotechs might be faster, because they are created on a sole purpose around a target or a modalities. Versus Big Pharma not, right? They're going to jump on it. That's one thing. But then it's kind of like an universe where they complement each other. I'm still today convinced that large organizations from a clinical operations are much faster, maybe not fast, but more efficient to do like big studies. They have their infrastructure of clinical operations, for instance, and other things that might be faster than smaller biotechs. So, if you marry them both properly together, you might be very successful.
And I would like to conclude slowly to this part, and I would like to understand what indeed you can say you bring from your operations, commercial background to the development. What you can say today?
Well, I definitely an experience understanding. At the end of the day, for a successful product, it has to be given to your end customer, and understanding how this interface works between the physician, or even so the payer, the physician, and the patient, might guide you very early on what is your POC or PIFCO indication, something like that. And then obviously just basic leadership skills, how to get people together to work on a common purpose.
Yes, okay. Frédéric, then I would like to jump into a more personal questions. Yes, because you firstly maybe you explained you worked in 6 different countries, 6 different places, 5 different countries, and I would like to understand how you manage the work-life balance with your family, and how it worked, because maybe you're a Swiss person and you're more sensitive to this, but it's never easy to travel a lot like this. And
Yeah. Well, first, I have to say that I was supported by my wife, Sylvia, who was, without her support, this would not have been possible. She gave up her job, her permanent job, to work for her own company as a freelancer, and taking care of the children. So in that respect, without her willingness to follow, this would have been very, very difficult. Now, we moved with Novartis, and obviously it comes with a lot of support and help. And that, then you have just to be open to new, and you have to embrace the newness of going somewhere.
Yes, it was part of the path to yes, you make your career, you decide your choices with opportunities, and then yes, you decide to go back to you.
Well, to be fair, right? I mean, obviously, we discussed that with my wife, whether we want to do that or not, and we debated about pros and cons and stuff like that.
To come back or to travel.
Exactly. So we started to travel when our first daughter was very small. So it was kind of like, that's easy to move. And then we wanted to be back for her kindergarten time, which, we came then back, when she was, she was 14 when we came back. So then things changed, right? But that's kind of like the first plan. And then our second daughter was born in New Jersey, and then we kind of like started to like this expat life as you live it through here in Zurich, right? There's this aspect of you're surrounded by international people. Now our children were in international schools, and it's a pretty nice, rich environment. You can meet a lot of interesting people. So that's great. But then we realized that was, COVID hit. We had plans to go home, and then it changed a little bit everything. And then we said, okay, now it's time, because mainly our parents are not getting younger, as we say in Swiss German, and then we wanted to be a bit closer to our parents. And we also realized that for our children, the school system, these are not these international school systems and the Swiss school system, they're not incompatible, but we wanted to give them the chance to be in a normal school system and not, in the international school for the rest of their life.
Okay.
So it was a good time. And we said, okay, then let's move.
Okay.
And then we decided very short notice and said, okay, that's it. We go home.
Okay, and come back to the local schools.
Exactly. And then we put them back into the local schools. It was a bit difficult to adapt at the beginning, but that was manageable.
Yeah.
Still. Yeah.
Good, great. Another question I have, Frédéric. I wonder if you have any secret for your authenticity, because it's it's kind of impressive. You're yes, you have a big career, but you stay like quite simple and.
Yeah, I think, first of all...
Did you struggle with this sometimes in your career? How did you...
Well, my authenticity was always a strength, which I wasn't even aware of for a long time. I think for me, the things were always more important than me. I wanted to do a good job. I wanted to create a team, or I wanted to develop a drug. I wanted to get it approved. So the purpose of what I was doing was more important always than my personal
feeling,
moving on, or my personal career. And I think that's something that people feel, and that's how you come across authentic. I learned this. Obviously, I was probably not as authentic in my early days of career, where you have the impression, you have to show that you're like a cool guy or you're the tough manager. And then you start to realize the less you do, the more impact you have. Because if you ask people for their help and you are yourself, they're not going to help this kind of avatar of the tough manager. They're going to help Frédéric.
Yes.
And that's how you interact with people more, and then you realize that's the way to go.
Do you have any special stories?
Oh, no, I don't have a special story. It's just that I had this, as all these young managers, I had this 360 and appraisals, and my first assessments were not very good because I think it was not managing myself properly, extremely dominant. I like to speak, as you know. And but I realized that it came up, this authenticity piece came up somehow, and I started to realize that there is something.
Okay.
And then I went through these development programs, and I realized that's the way. And it's easier as well. And it's easier as well.
Definitely, yes.
You don't have to. You don't have to play a role. You can be yourself. And I am who I am. It's a stupid sentence because I think you have to control yourself to be the best of you, but it still has to be you. And something like authenticity, we feel it, we smell it. You have managers going on stage, and you know within like 10 seconds whether they're authentic or not. It doesn't take a lot for us to feel that. It's a very human. We have very good senses of that, and I think you cannot. If you try to be authentic, you're going to be unauthentic, right? That's by definition.
Yes,
you should be yourself and accept. And I think that comes with acceptance, who you are, and accepting that you're not perfect. You're not the perfect manager or leader or whatever. You are not by definition. But if you're a nice guy, it helps, right? If you are an authentic guy, it helps, and then you can work on your development. Then
Yes, your personal and then your career, your professional goals. Yeah. Good. Frédéric, last question for you. Do you have any advice you want to share with people who want to make this switch between commercial and development, or the other side?
Well, I think first of all, I think try to understand what the other side really means. What is it? What you're looking for? A lot of discussions, I have people who say, I would like to go into commercial. You say, what in commercial? What attracts you? And then you realize they don't really know. So that's the first thing. If you don't know where you want to go, try to figure out. There's tons of opportunities to do rotations and, shadowing, whatever. That's the first thing. The second thing is be clear aware of what are the requirements to go there. What do people do in the daily? What is the requirements? And map that against your profile, and then look at what skill sets you need to develop. Because it's always, if you apply for a job, let's assume there's a job that comes up every 2 years. You apply, you don't get it. What can you do in these 2 years? Can you wait, or should you use these 2 years to fill the gaps in your CV or
then
in the requirements?
What do you do? You meet people?
Well, you have to, I think, first of all, you have to talk to a lot of people to understand, and they need to know you, right? It's as simple as that. You have to network, but it's always networking with a purpose. You're generally interested in moving. Talk to people. If they don't know you, it's going to be very difficult to get this switch. And then align your mentors and sponsors who will be able to support you to do that move, and find the one guy on the other side that might be able to hire you, or at least opening doors. There's tons of, I think, there's tons of opportunities within HR. They have a lot of rotation programs and stuff like that. It's just that it's not necessarily used. Most people don't really know. Even, I have to say badly, some HR people don't really know what opportunities there are. But that's and stop continue believing in what you want to do. Yeah. Just continue and say, I want to do that. It took me a few years to get to the other side.
Yes, and finally you switched your career at
45.
At 45.
Or 44, yeah. I switched my career, and it still feels kind of like awkward. I still feel sometimes this imposter syndrome, right? Or like, am I the right person?
But it's a good sign.
It's a good sign, exactly. And then I think you have to be humble and accept the fact that you don't know everything better, and just learn as much as you can and let people lead on the side. You don't always have to be the one who calls the shots. Let other people take this space. If you don't know better, let them do it. Yeah. And learn. That's the only thing you can do.
Yeah, thank you, Frédéric. Thank you so much for this conversation, because I think, yes, you shared so many insights, or you lived it, and it will help probably many people who are listening. Thank you, Frédéric.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for this opportunity. It was great to talk to you. Much fun.
Thanks for listening. I hope you gained valuable insights. Want to keep chatting? Drop your comments on LinkedIn. You'll find the link in the episode description. Got ideas or guest suggestions? Message me on LinkedIn. And hey, if you want to support the podcast, give it 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. That means the world to me. Catch you soon for more exciting episodes. Stay curious, stay inspired, and stay tuned to Pharma Minds.